Now, as I said to you as we began the recognitions this evening, we encourage you to stay for item 4.01 on the agenda, which is Undesign the Redline. This pretty remarkable program is something you'll want to hear about, and you'll also want to be able to applaud the students as they are recognized at the end. So with that, I'd like to call Mr. Scott Reeves, our Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, forward, who will take it from here. Scott.
Thank you, and good evening, President Davidson, Dr. Clark, Mrs. Marshall, and members of the board. I'm excited for you to hear the Undesign the Redline research done by 4 very special Westerville Central students, Malcolm, Mia, Naja, and Carolina. Their work is an outgrowth of the Exploration of Space grant in collaboration with Ohio State's Kirwan Institute, Otterbein's Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Center, Worthington City Schools, and the Westerville and Worthington Libraries. We are thankful to Reverend Bell, who introduced this opportunity to us a little more than a year ago. And at this time, I would like to introduce Dr. Margaret Kohler, Professor of English at Otterbein University and a key member of this grant, who will share the background on the research these students did this summer.
Thank you. Well, I want to start by acknowledging it all began with a learning community on race and ethnicity back about 5 years ago that Vaughn and I were both part of, and kind of, at that time just reading and talking about future projects, and I feel like this one has brought that to fruition in some way. So Undesign the Redline itself is a national initiative that was created by a design firm called Designing the We, and it has been in many cities around the country, I think over 100 large cities in the country, and in Columbus it was brought, and the Columbus specific parts were created by the YWCA. So Undesign the Redline has been making the rounds in Central Ohio since the springtime, and in November, and actually you could still catch it, it's up until December 17th, Otterbein University and the Westerville Public Library collaborated to bring the exhibit to Westerville. So if you go, you will see background about redlining policies more generally, which I, give a college professor a mic. I could talk about the history of that, but I won't tonight. You can go to the exhibit and learn more. But you will see information about redlining more generally. You will see maps, redlining maps of Columbus. You will see interactive parts where viewers of the exhibit have noted what neighborhoods they've lived in Columbus, and shared some of their personal stories about living in Central Ohio. Now, Westerville was not part of the redlining maps because at that time it was a smaller town and not part of Metro Columbus. And so with these wonderful 4 students from Westerville Central High School, we set about researching local history that kind of provided a Westerville-specific look at some of the same history around housing discrimination, demographics, education, things like this. So you can see we've created a panel, an additional panel. The students worked hard on this. They met with us on Saturday mornings at 10 a.m., which was pretty heroic. And each of them identified an area that they would look at in Westerville that was relevant, and they'll each talk about that. But Malcolm, for example, looked at the history of restrictive covenants, racially restrictive covenants in Westerville neighborhoods. Mia looked at the history of the Huber Ridge neighborhood in Westerville and did some oral history work with residents of that neighborhood. Naja looked at the history of the 1986 win-win agreement, which I'm sure a lot of people here know something about. I know a few do. She looked at that. And Carolina looked at she did some oral history interviews with the first graduating class from Westerville Central High School, students of color who were part of that class and what their experiences there were like. So I think that, will they each come up and talk a little bit? How should we do this, Scott?
Start with Carolina.
Yes, yeah. Carolina?
So my research was based around the first graduating class of Russellville Central. They came in 2003, and I looked at the redistricting for Russellville Central because those kids were pulled from north and south and neighborhoods that go all the way from Morse Road, which is pretty far. And I got those oral histories, and I got an oral history that was pretty important to me, and she was my cheer coach, Coach Keisha. And she originally went to South, and I thought it was very interesting to see how her life differed from other kids who lived closer to Central. And she lived past the Iron Pony, which is, by Hawthorne, which is pretty far away from Russellville Central. And, it was just interesting to, hear what the history was back then. Kids of color didn't get really much recognition. They didn't have the racial, the racial classes that we now talk about in 2023 compared to 2003. So I think we've upgraded a lot in 20 years, and that's what I researched.
I did my research on win-win, the demographics that make up my own classes, which are AP and honor classes in Westerville Central, and as well as getting around Brown. And what I found was how, especially with the honors and AP classes, even with the busing, which is when kids from outside of Westerville are brought into different high schools to just diversify the place, even how even in the honors classes and the AP classes, it's still very secluded, and there isn't as much as people of color in those classes, which I've experienced myself. And I really wanted to look into that, as I'm very passionate about opening those spaces for people of color, and how with getting around Brown, how even own districts made their own restrictions without breaking the law, but they still threw it under the bus with kids of color in their own schools.
Hi, I'm Mia Nybarger, and when this project came into my lap, I immediately knew I wanted to go into research about Huber Ridge because it was my neighborhood, it was my area, and then I found out that I wasn't a part of the redlining map, so that kind of derailed my thought. But then when talking to my peers, they were doing, schooling and redistricting, so that made me centralize my thought on demographic changes in Huber Ridge. And what I noticed from doing oral histories of people who lived in the neighborhood, who still do live in the neighborhood, was that around 15-ish years ago, the neighborhood, Huber Ridge, was not that good. It was a poor neighborhood that had gunshots and car break-ins, and it was called that side of 270. But you were able to go to Westerville City Schools while not paying Westerville proper taxes, which is what drew a lot of people in. And then, 15-ish years later, people moved in, and renters and renovators and families, and they brought the neighborhood up. They brought the people closer together, and they made everybody care about the neighborhood and the land that they were in. So the property value went up, and so did the taxes went up. And that, kind of pushed the original homeowners who came there for their lower taxes out of the neighborhood. But everything was justified by the new schools, like Minerva Park, being moved in. And while some people were moved out, families got new schools, and that's what everybody was okay with. And while I wish I got more, I only have so much time, and I will continue my research.
Hi, I'm Malcolm Poindexter, and I do research on the neighborhoods in Westerville and the restrictions that they had. I really focused on Minerva Park and Gold Park because of their interesting restrictions. Gold Park had racial restrictions, and they were used as vacation homes. So people actually came to Westerville to go on vacation. And then Minerva Park had racial restrictions and alcohol restrictions. And also I created a list of all the neighborhoods and color-coded it by like which high school that they went to. But there's still a lot of research to be done about this topic, and hopefully someone picks up where I left off.
Yep.
Once again, please give them, they spent their entire summer doing this research. And so the board would like to recognize you. So Carolina, I'll have you go first. Naja. Mia. Malcolm. And while the board takes their seat, I'll show you the panel that was created on the exhibit at Otterbein.
Otherwise, we guess.
Okay, wasn't that worth staying for? We told you. So at this time, we're going to take a couple seconds, and if you received an award tonight, we're going to take you out in the lobby, and Charlie is going to take pictures. But if you would like, you're welcome to come back and join us and listen. It will be riveting. And thank you all for coming.